candidates vying for the GOP presidential nomination, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson may have been the most unique. As an outspoken advocate of economic discipline and free market solutions, he was one of the few candidates with executive experience who could point to a record that reflected his rhetoric. However, running as a Republican didn't quite pan out. Now Governor Johnson is making a go of it as a libertarian. And guess what? He's making some noise. In a hypothetical matchup, a recent poll has Governor Johnson polling a full 6% of the vote against President Obama and Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. So joining us at the table now for another edition of Uncensored is Governor Gary Johnson. Governor, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Well, let's start with another former GOP candidate, Jon Huntsman, who compared the GOP recently to communist China for lashing out against Republicans who go off script. Did you feel that was the case in your run as a Republican?
You know, what happened to me was really CNN did it to me. CNN said that I had to be at 2% in A, B, and C poll, and I wasn't in A, B, C poll. So how do you get into the debate if you're not in the poll? And then CNN about 8 months ago included me in their bi-weekly poll for the first time, and I was at that time tied with Kane, ahead of Huntsman and ahead of Santorum, and that was the last time my name appeared in any of their bi-weekly polls. They dropped my name with no explanation whatsoever to follow. So really manipulating the process in a way that just goes unnoticed by everybody.
Well, recently you were quoted as saying, "I'm a messenger. I think for the most part I'm delivering the same message as Ron Paul." Ron Paul, safe to say, will not win the Republican nomination, nor will he be the next president of the United States. But he's at least still in the race. Why run on his message if you don't think it's going to get him there?
Well, so I think we're both messengers. I think this is the fastest growing segment of American politics. And when you look at Communication 101, when we hear the same message from two different sources, it resonates a little bit better. If it's just one person saying it, how many times have you heard, gosh, Ron Paul's a little kooky, by somebody saying, I don't think what he says is kooky. All right. Well, when you hear that same, when you hear what he says from somebody else, oh, I get it. I mean, that's Communication 101. So it shouldn't just be two. It shouldn't be just Ron Paul and myself. It should be dozens, and I would argue that there are thousands out there capable of delivering this message. But
and by this message, you mean libertarianism?
Oh, yeah, liberty, freedom. Speaking with a broad brush stroke, I think most Americans describe themselves as being fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. I'm in that group. Okay, so there's the philosophy. And then I think there are three components to running for president successfully. One is identifying the problems. Two, identifying the solutions that go along with the problems. And then actually having a resume to suggest that you could actually, or that you would, doggedly pursue what you're talking about.
Well, I'm going to leave it to the rest of the table to talk to you about libertarianism. I'm sure they have great questions for you. But I want to talk about the race that's currently happening. You and Mitt Romney actually have something in common. You're both millionaires. You're a self-made millionaire. A lot of people don't know this. How would you have defended your wealth? Because he's had a really difficult time defending his success and prosperity in general.
Well, I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. For me, money has always represented freedom. So I started...
How elitist of you.
I started a one-man handyman business, which I think is a little bit different than the Romney experience. But I started a one-man handyman business, me, and actually grew it to employ over 1,000 in New Mexico. I was New Mexico's largest construction employer. I sold that business in '99. Nobody lost their job, and they're doing better than ever. I'm not sure how that works, but that gave me my freedom, which doesn't take a whole lot of money to garner your freedom, and that gives me the ability to do what I want to do when I want to do it. It allows me to, for the last 2.5 years, have a full-time unpaid job doing this.
So do you think, just to follow back on that, do you think Romney's done an adequate job defending his wealth and talking about prosperity in general?
Well, like I say, you asking me to personally relate to wealth, for me, wealth represents freedom. Wealth represents the ability to not have to work, if you will, or do the things that you want to do, and that was always the goal for me. That doesn't take so much money.
Well, and lastly from me, and then I'll open it up to the table, who would you advise Mr. Romney to select for his vice president?
I wouldn't pretend to advise Mr. Romney on who to pick for his...
Would you take the job if you got the call?
Well, sure.
Sure you would? I think you're the first person to say yes.
Well, the notion of being a heartbeat away from the presidency, and would that, if you're implying that I would take the job and toe the Romney line, well, no, that wouldn't be part of the condition of my taking the vice presidency. So it would be, I think, a great opportunity. But I am pursuing the Libertarian nomination for president. My message has gone unchanged from Republican to what I'm doing now. And just back to the Romney question, I would accept that as long as I got to think and do what I've always gotten to think and do. So I would never get the invitation to be his vice president.
It's a moot point. All right, go ahead, Table.
Governor, what are you training right now?
Yes.
What are you training for?
Well, my fiance and I got accepted to Leadville again.
The
this
governor
summer.
is a triathlete, a distance runner. Right?
Well,
so you're doing the Leadville 100?
The Leadville 100 mountain bike, yeah. So this will be my 9th Leadville 100.
Wow.
And that's, so I've got to be in shape. I can't embarrass myself this summer doing that. And Kate got accepted also, so this will be her 3rd Leadville.
Let me go back to the John Huntsman question for just a moment, because Governor Huntsman was actually speaking because he wasn't invited to a fundraiser in Florida for some of the things that he said, I guess while campaigning, that didn't fit with the Republican message in his mind. You are certainly someone who has, as you just said, toed a line that doesn't necessarily fit neatly with the Republican message, whether that's on foreign policy or drug legalization. And I'm just curious, your experience within the Republican Party, was that welcomed, or did you have a similar feeling as Governor Huntsman, that there was sort of an apathy to speaking out and walking outside the lines?
This is the 3rd political office that I've run for, President of the United States. The other 2 offices were Governor of New Mexico and then re-election as Governor of New Mexico. The main reason I got elected Governor of New Mexico was the Republican Party of New Mexico was totally inclusive.
Right.
Hey, we're going to make you part of the process. You can be a part of the debate, the discussion. You just need to know that you'll never win.
Is that what you experienced on the national stage, though?
No, that's what I experienced. That's Governor of New Mexico Republican Party.
Right.
What I experienced on the national stage was what I asked the Republican Party to do, the RNC to do, was, hey, stand up for the fact that if the criteria is that I have to be at a certain percentage in A, B, and C poll, will you stand up for putting me in the polls that determine who gets in the debates? That's all I asked. And no, they just, nope.
But let me ask you, you blame CNN for not being inclusive with the poll and therefore not being able to be on the debate stage. What do you say to the criticism, though, that you could in this election act as a spoiler with that 6%, which is impressive, as a spoiler for the Republican GOP candidate and a party that's been good to you, helping you become governor?
I absolutely reject that. I believe I will take more votes from Obama. The notion of marriage equality, the notion of let's get out of the conflicts that we're currently involved in, repealing the Patriot Act, drug reform, you know, he signs the National Defense Authorization Act. Look, I think on civil liberties, I think I trump Obama. On fiscal issues, I think I trump Romney. So I think I'm, worst case, best case, I'm going to take equally from both parties. And I'm going to take from a group in the middle that wouldn't ordinarily vote. And that happens to be the largest segment of American politics, independence and decline to state.
We've asked often at this table the question whether it's possible to run on a national stage on basically being willing to cut entitlement programs. Do you think that it's possible to make that case to the American people in a way that it is not a political death sentence, that you could actually say, we need to, not that we're going to just sort of tinker with them a little bit, not that we're going to do a little balanced budget stuff, we're going to actually dramatically change the entitlement system in this country? Can you win on that?
Well, I'm putting that to the test. I mean, I'm making 3 promises as President of the United States. One is I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's outlining a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending in what would be 2014. But that's Medicaid, that's Medicare, that's military spending. Social Security, very simply, is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. It is a problem that is pale in comparison to Medicare. Medicare is the bank buster. And based on my experience as governor of New Mexico, I reformed Medicaid in New Mexico, health care for the poor. We changed it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We saved hundreds of millions of dollars. We set up better health care networks by doing that. I think if the federal government would have block granted the state of New Mexico 43% less money, given me control over health care to the poor, done away with all the strings and the mandates associated with how to do that, that I could have effectively overseen that. I would maintain the same for Medicare, a federal program that needs to devolve to the states, 43% less money, give it to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and I believe that's exactly what will happen. We'll have fabulous innovation that gets emulated. We'll have some horrible success that will get avoided. But it needs to be 50 models working on this as opposed to Washington top down. And, of course, back to the premise of all this, can you get elected? People that fall out of their chair when they hear about a 43% reduction in Medicare. Look, the alternative is not having Medicare. The alternative is a collapsed government. The alternative is a monetary system that collapses, and that's because of the amount of money that we're printing and borrowing, 43 cents out of every dollar that we're currently spending. The mathematics just are unsustainable. We're 6 to 8 years away from being Greece. Greece, I mean, so much of the news, Greece, 160% of debt to GDP. We're 6 to 8 years away from that.
So, Governor, going back to the politics of this, do you plan to take this all the way to November?
Well, I hope to be the Libertarian nominee, and that happens 2 weeks from now, actually. That's May 5th, the vote in Las Vegas, Nevada. I hope to be the Libertarian nominee, and the pie-in-the-sky scenario is that I potentially poll at 15% against Obama and Romney, believing the nominee will be Romney, and being on the national debate stage. And if that happens, I think anything is possible if that happens. And the 6% now that you pointed out, I don't know if it's me so much at 6% as it is just a third name at 6%. But I do think that Ron Paul is not going to get the nomination. So what happens to all of that support? Where do they go? I think at the base of Ron Paul's support are a whole bunch of people with brains, and I don't think they need to be told anything with regard to where they're going to go. They're going to figure it out.
Well, we'll look forward to hopefully watching you on a national stage over the next few months. Thanks so much, Governor Johnson, for joining us. Up next, the Island of Misfit Stories.